Welcome back, everyone, to Never Stay Dead. We are back, and I am Damien, and I'm here with Matt. Want to say hi, Matt?
Hello, Internet.
Today, we are going to discuss whether the current Batman run by Tom King has any value whatsoever.
Ooh, all right.
It's a very controversial... I think there's a lot of haters and a lot of lovers for this run of Batman. Would you agree, or do you only know of haters?
I know people who defend it, and I've tried to find polite ways to ask why. Which is hard to do online.
Well, and I'll provide my version of why, but I'm probably not the most enthusiastic about this run, but much more than Matt, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
And King came into becoming the Batman writer pretty early in his career. I think it wasn't too long ago that he was not a comic book writer at all, and he wrote a novel called something Empty Skies. I can't remember the name of his novel, but it was one of those novels about superheroes. And it was written kind of out of chronological order. I read about the first third of it, and it was kind of slow going, and I had to return it to the library. And then he may have written a few short comics here and there, and then he was invited to co-write Grayson with Tim Seeley. And they had what I thought was an excellent run on Grayson, doing Grayson as kind of a spy. At some point, he kind of revealed in podcast interviews and stuff that he was an ex-CIA operative. And he joined the CIA after 9/11 to help fight terrorism. And he became a counterterrorism... I think he was a field operative at times anyway. And so then... I'm not sure the order of things. He did this, what's it called? The Sheriff of Baghdad at Vertigo, right, which I have not read. And he did a mini-series on the Omega Men, which was quite good, but maybe not totally successful in its completion.
Right. He had his part on the Dark Side War.
I forgot about that.
Oh, and around that time, he worked on the Robin War, which was something I...
Oh, okay. So he's been involved in some of the crossovers, but then but I think Grayson and the Omega Men were his major DC works, and then at Marvel he did a maxi series, a 12-issue series on the Vision, which for my money, was an outstanding comic book. It was kind of revisioning the Vision as a suburban family man, robot gone wrong, and that won all kinds of accolades. I think it won an Eisner for him, and I think it was kind of the result of that and DC seeing how good the trade sales were for Omega Men. I get that information from a podcast that King was on. That led them to go back to King and say, we want to sign you up on an exclusive deal, and what would you like to write now? And he said Batman, and they gave him Batman. That's my understanding of Tom King's career. And now he's also getting a lot of notoriety for writing this updated postmodern take on Mr. Miracle, Jack Kirby's classic character from the New Gods.
Right.
I just wanted to put all that into context because I think it's interesting how fast his career has taken off.
You forgot one very important entry in his pre-comic work. He did a book called Busty, which is one man's obsession with breasts.
Really?
Warning, adults only. So I felt that was important to add.
Where did you find that information? Is that like
I looked it up on the Google, and that came up.
And that's the same Tom King. One man's obsession with breasts.
Unless randomly some Tom King wrote a book separate from him, and that's the only thing they ever wrote.
Well, I don't see much of an obsession with breasts in any of his comics that I've read. But maybe in Sheriff of Baghdad.
Maybe he got it out of his system. I never have. So...
Clearly, the generation of comic book readers who came up in the 90s and early 2000s probably all have an obsession with breasts. But
that's my problem.
Whereas the rest of us have no obsession with breasts whatsoever.
Right, all clean, don't work blue. Good for you.
I've never stared at women's breasts.
Well, this took a turn. All right, so we're here to talk about Batman, not boobs.
Yes, and so why don't you talk about your
all right
experiences with Batman under Tom King, which has been like, let me just add, it's
Rebirth.
been we're on issue 45 now. They're coming up on issue 50, which will be the wedding with Catwoman, supposedly.
And I've read through 44, so I'm current, but not to the latest issue. But
I have read 45.
It's the start of a new arc, so I don't know. I wouldn't feel super comfortable talking about it anyways. But so we get introduced to Tom King's take on Batman, the Rebirth 1 issue, which in my mind was neither here nor there. You know, and then we dive into this arc with Gotham and Gotham Girl. I didn't love it, but I saw where some people liked it. You know, I'm not going to jump on anyone for that one. I think, at the very least, the naming was confusing as hell because they're talking about the legacy of Gotham as the place, and then sometimes Gotham as the character, and I just got a little muddled for that fact alone, but...
Well, at that point, I had the sense of the people I was listening to being a bit puzzled by... Like, they were expecting some really radical Tom King kind of thing after coming off the Vision onto Batman, and at that point, it seemed King was kind of trying to do fairly straightforward Batman.
Right. And I think that's going to come through later to some of my points, is he tries to write it all very straightforward, but there's some complex things he tries to tackle. Right after his initial arc, there had to be some tie-over with Night of the Monster Men, which was bad, but that was bad for everything it was in, so...
Right, so again, maybe we'll just leave that out of the discussion of whether King is bad or good.
Right. And I'm just accounting this book by book just to go blow for blow. But when we start getting a little more into it, we go to I Am Suicide, which is...
And that's where I dropped out for a while.
I did too. It's a muddled, confusing mess of a story. Somewhat seemingly intentionally so, because you're dealing with these identities and kind of trying to draw a parallel between Batman and Bane, which exists, but it's already been done and done better.
Right.
And done better in an issue by Gail Simone in particular in Secret Six.
And Bane has long been set up as kind of a anti-Batman, a reverse-engineered Batman or something.
Right, and not to a T, to where it's like a reverse Flash or, you know...
Right, no, not to a T, but on a metaphorical level.
Right. But for me, I Am Suicide is where this one really starts to fall apart. There's this whole play with Batman and Bane, but you have the Psycho Pirate in there to try to influence and create more tension. Meanwhile, this is going on, and I know this is resolved, but it's kind of like backhandedly resolved. Catwoman's accused of killing thousands. And it's this thing to play up the tension to bring in Catwoman into this run, which becomes the biggest factor.
And she confessed to it, right? And was sent to Arkham.
Right. But that had to do with the Psycho Pirate and then, you know...
Trying to save a friend of hers from taking the fall.
But that would imply that her friend killed millions.
Thousands.
Thousands, sorry.
I thought it was thousands.
Thousands, you know, it's thousands. I said millions because I was ratcheting up for no good reason. But it's just, why? What? The whole point of the story is you needed to get Batman to go fight Bane and have this whole contrived thing and have Catwoman there for a bit of a reversal at one point. But this whole setup is a lot to get there. And not ever truly paid off in my mind.
Right.
Well, and so, yeah, you get to I Am Suicide's end, and you have this whole bit where you've had this reversal with Catwoman, but they're fine. And then you get to Rooftops, part 1 and 2, which really should have been one issue. And, like, Batman and Catwoman do it, basically. And then she runs off. And in it, they're trying to play up their relationship through the years, but trying to account for the different ways they first met throughout different continuity and whatnot. And kind of pointing to, like, it doesn't really matter, they're here now, which is fair, that's fine. But the way they play it is almost this Grant Morrison-esque multiverse crashing to just kind of point it all out, bring it all in, and say, it doesn't matter. But if you're just going to say, it doesn't matter, you're not going to worry about the continuity, skip it.
Right.
If it doesn't matter, it doesn't fucking matter. Like, just get where you're going. And so there's all this hubbubaloo about all that, and then it's all for naught. And so what was actually the more interesting aspect was just brushed aside. And it's supposed to be a reprieve between I Am Suicide and I Am Bane to just make it so that there's this ginormous Bane story. But there's no earthly need for this ginormous Bane story. Especially because a lot of it revolves around Batman and Catwoman anyways.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything because I didn't read that one either.
Okay. Well, I Am Bane escalates and somewhat culminates with a pet peeve of mine that happens, I feel, more often in Batman than any other superhero comic, where Bane starts punching through not each and every, but most of Batman's rogues gallery, sans Joker notably. Bane's punching through and they're all saying one terrified thing and Bane just punches them, and it's just this comic of Bane punching through Batman's rogues gallery. And it's kind of somewhat of a reverse of Batman trying to wear down Bane before they get to a confrontation through the rogues gallery.
Right.
As opposed to when they were first set up. The thing is like, I saw that there. It's not played quite like that, though, so you'd have to have the meta-narrative to understand, like, why that's even supposed to be a thing. But it's just page after page of Bane punching people, like, oh, I am the big strong man, rah! And then they fight, and then it kind of comes down to Catwoman anyways. It devalues the entire mythos in one issue. Because if Bane is this smart, brawny man, if Batman can deal with him, all the other people Bane took out in a panel are no threat anymore. Right. Like, they shouldn't be. Like, it just devalues the mythos.
Well, I think if one sentence could sum up Tom King, it might be devalues the mythos. That's a pattern with him, right? I think.
You're supposed to be playing good cop, but yeah.
Well, I will play good cop later when we get to some issues that I've read.
Right. And then from there we go to the Button.
Which I also skipped. I mean, I'm well aware of the plot of the Button because I've heard so many people talk about it and I read a little.
Well, and this plays into the number one thing that I find disgusting about DC right now, which is everything involving around Doomsday Clock and what they're doing with Watchmen. I think it's scummy, I think it's bad, and I think it shows a lack of discretion, and that's a whole other thing.
Right, and we can't really blame Tom King personally for that. I mean, that's a DC-wide decision to wrap everything up in this Watchmen-based thing.
He could have not, I feel like. He could have not wrapped in this tie-in.
You think he could have said, no, I don't want to do the Button? Sorry, Jeff Johns.
Yeah, I'd hope so.
Your overall plot thing doesn't interest me and I don't want to be involved.
Yeah, I don't...
I assume Jeff Johns said, I want someone to do something to help set me up for my Watchmen series.
Oh my god. Yeah. Presumably, And here's the thing, if you take out the Watchmen component and whatnot, these two issues are actually more of a multiverse thing, playing more off of Flashpoint than anything else. Right. So...
Well, I think my understanding is one significant thing happened in there, that he met the alternate universe Thomas Wayne, who told him basically to get a life, don't destroy your whole life being Batman. Have more to your life than just that. Isn't that something along those lines that he told him?
That sounds right.
And that leads into his proposal to Catwoman, I believe.
Yeah, though in between those two we have the Brave and the Mold.
Oh, he hadn't proposed to Catwoman at that point? Okay. The Brave and the Mold was this is where I jumped back in. And I feel like for the most part I've managed to completely ignore the I Am Suicide and I Am Bane period and read and enjoy starting with the Brave and the Mold Batman going forward. And I was not enjoying King before, and I dropped it, and I came back with a different attitude, my own self with a different attitude, and I enjoyed it a lot more. And the Brave and the Mold was. Did you want to describe Brave and the Mold? Or?
You can go more to it. My big point is that it's one issue, and it's good, and it's partially better for its brevity, which is going to be a big component to...
Tom King does do one-shots quite well, I guess. Although I found it odd, because basically at the end, spoilers, although everything on this... If you don't want Batman spoiled, then don't listen to this podcast. Except for issue 45, which Matt hasn't read. But at the end, the Swamp Thing just kills the killer of his father, the bad guy. And Batman curses him out, basically. But I didn't get what the point of it all was. It was a fun read. But I felt like this hurts the mythos of the Swamp Thing. And whatever Tom King thinks he's telling us about Batman is not clear.
That's fair. Yeah.
And that's why I'm kind of a partial Tom King supporter. I am enjoying the ride, but he often abuses the mythos of various things, and he often is unclear. He acts like he's making a big point, but what is the big point? He's not willing to really put it out there. He's like implying there's some point to all of this.
And then, so then there's issue 24, which is the prologue as a prelude. And in my mind, it ties in directly with that second annual, which is the re-encapsulation again of the Catwoman and Batman relationship.
Right. So I guess I don't have it in front of me, and I've kind of forgotten it. It's kind of the beginning of the War of Jokes and Riddles, but kind of a resting point where he proposes to Catwoman.
I'm going to argue it's just kind of the breath of air before we dive in to that. There is an undercurrent. It sets up the undercurrent that goes through the War of Joke and Riddles. But okay, so I need to kind of make a hard break here.
Okay.
So every one of the Tom King Batman stories up until this point, I may or may not like. People are going to have different tastes. People have different sensibilities. I'm not the biggest Batman fan, so that's part of it. There's a lot about what DC's doing in this moment that I'm not a huge fan of. That's part of it. There's different takes and different sensibilities with Batman. Tom King's isn't my favorite, but I like it more than others at certain points in what we've had so far. Like, there's moments, and the art's been gorgeous all the way through. Different sensibilities, different things. If you like a lot of these Batman comics up to this point, I get it. I'm on board with you. You know, like what you like. We're not always going to like the same thing. I liked a lot of Dan Slott Spider-Man comics that a lot of people think I'm crazy for loving. Oh, well.
Yeah.
There is a number of problems that happened throughout the War at Joke and Riddles, and then one of the next, though not directly next, Batman stories in Tom King that to me cross lines to where I'm really questioning how this was approved, how this went on, how this got to be such big of a thing. Like, these are fundamental problems in my mind with Batman in particular. Some just storytelling issues in my mind. So I just want to draw that hard line here to, like, you know, I'm not a fan sensibility, but let's dig into more of the problem.
But I seem to be liking it better from Jokes and Riddles onward.
Right.
So I cross that line. That's the sacrilege. I wallow in the sacrilege of the Jokes and Riddles and other stories that have come since. So tell me more about what's wrong with Jokes and Riddles. Well, the War of Jokes and Riddles is framed as Before you answer me, Catwoman, on whether you want to marry me, I have this important story to tell you. And he tells her this story of the time when the Riddler and Joker were battling each other and gathered all the criminals to either one side or the other and had a huge war throughout Gotham.
Right.
Was that for the privilege of who would get to fight Batman? Now I'm a little fuzzy on that.
Oh no. That's not what it was about in the end. That's what it was framed at one point in the story, which is stupid to begin with. So the lie was stupid. The reality is stupider. Okay, so yeah, we start off with it's in the Wayback Machine, supposedly.
Right.
Which makes this make less sense.
Right after 0 year or something, which doesn't make sense.
Right, but that would mean that the Riddler should be in jail right then, because that was supposedly his first appearance, at least within this continuity of Batman.
Right.
And he's already out and being this big player. And already, and this raises questions about how 0 year would work, because if it's supposed to be, before year 1 or whatever, the Bat mythos in general has been established.
But Tom King doesn't care, because he has the full Rogues Gallery as if it was now.
Right, so why is this set back? And also... Oh, this is a detail I forgot to look at, which I just need to look at real quick.
He's looking at his vast digital collection.
Right.
Which he keeps in a box.
They do change the costume slightly, so it looks like kind of a Frank Miller Dark Knight costume with the Fat Bat. That's just weird, man. So... Frickin' hell. So... The Riddler goes to the Joker because the Joker can't laugh. Okay, so let's break this down.
The Joker's like killing comedians and stuff because he can't find... He's killing people because none of them can make him laugh.
We kind of get that in backstory. We don't get that in action. And so the Riddler's trying to solve this. Why? No real reason. No real reason he should care about the Joker. And they're going to go to war. So why does he care then, too? So the Joker's essentially right now a mobster in makeup. And he's not the Joker. He's playing everything straight. He's dour. He's just a grumpy Gus. What kills me, though, is if you are writing Batman and your only twist is to make the Joker serious... I feel like you're doing it wrong. Now, I could think of 2 times this has happened before. There is DeMatteis's Going Sane story, in which the reason the Joker stops being a Joker is because he's dealt with Batman and he snaps into being sane. To me, that's the story that works, that's fine, and it's only for the moment. And the story hinges on that. The other time is in Grant Morrison's run. The Joker isn't crazy, bonkers, whatever, and is disguised as someone else. I never thought that worked, but it ties to the fact that the entire Grant Morrison Batman story is dealing with psychology and motivation. And so the sanity aspect and thus the humor aspect with the Joker kind of came and went with that as the story changed and played with those in different aspects. Mm-hmm. So... Whereas I think that's one of the major failings of the Grant Morrison Batman story. Like, at least there's some reason for it. Here, the reason that's given as to why the Joker's lost his luster is because things are too predictable because he always loses to Batman. Nah, man. This is what drives him bonkers somewhat. Like, if you look at some of the older comics, like, he goes... crazier and crashes crazier schemes because he needs to be Batman. It's like the wall he keeps needing to punch against. If there's any true consistency between the Joker and Batman, it's that. And to say that consistency between them is causing this, that doesn't work. And this is the crazy thing. Batman and Joker have been done in so many incarnations, trying to say that there's a consistent character trait to either of them.
Right.
Is wrong. But this is like the only aspect between these characters that is solid between every incarnation of them. And this story is saying, nah. And with no good reason. So we're already starting on the wrong foot. Was there anything else in like the initial few issues that hit you?
My general impression of it was just told in such a cool way. It was a tour de force of storytelling tricks. And at this point, and maybe it was, I don't know if Mr. Miracle had started up yet at this point or not, but I came back to Batman not expecting to get a Batman that I would like, but expecting to see Tom King do interesting things. And it felt like a tour de force of interesting things. He just created this feeling of this epic mob war, so to speak. And of Batman sort of spinning out of control and too many things going on at once for Batman to handle. And it was, beautifully illustrated. And I don't know what else to say about it, in fact, because it wasn't the Joker and the Riddler that I'm terribly familiar with. But then again, like you say, those things keep changing. So I just don't even know. I think the Riddler was somewhat based on Snyder's Riddler, but the Joker was a different kind of Joker than Snyder's Joker.
Well, that's to be sure.
But Snyder's Joker is kind of like a magical serial killer, and I didn't like that. I kind of liked this Joker better as a kind of a mob boss / serial killer.
As like every other Batman villain. Like, okay, so we get it broken down, and the next part that kills me is you have a huge portion of the Batman villain cast falling in line with these guys.
And, that totally, I didn't believe that. How is it so easy for them to control all these people? And if they're that powerful, then surely they could be Batman. You know what I'm saying? If in a way, like, I had to accept that Tom King was telling me a story that I couldn't believe in. But when I accepted that, I thought it was a brilliant tour de force. It was another way I look at Tom King is it's like going to a 3-ring circus and seeing all the different acts in the 3 rings performed perfectly all at the same time. They don't have a lot of plot to the 3 rings, but the 3 rings remain fascinating to me. So, okay, so I agree with you. Tom King is flawed, but I managed to enjoy him anyway. That's all I'm saying. I can't really defend the War of Joke and Riddles. And if you haven't got to the end yet, but the end, I thought, really fell on its face and really shows how Tom King kind of is an empty vessel, a bunch of tricks without a whole lot of meaning. Shall I skip to the end? The reason why he was telling Catwoman the whole story?
Well, I have 2 big points before we get there.
Okay, well, why don't we continue?
Because the War of Joke and Riddles is like
thoughts through it.
The bulk of this for me. So in the middle of the War of Joke and Riddles, you have essentially more or less an entire issue devoted to Deathstroke and Deadshot going at it. And supposedly this goes on for weeks as Batman does nothing.
Right, they kill hundreds of people just while trying to kill each other. And Batman is a totally impotent to stop it.
Well, not only is Batman totally impotent, hundreds of people are dying, while 2 trained assassins who, Deadshot generally won't kill people he doesn't need to, but he's not necessarily super opposed to it. Mm-hmm. Deathstroke's the consummate professional, so he would avoid doing that if for reputation over anything else. So we're destroying both of these characters' MO to a point of sociopathy that goes beyond what either one of them would do. And they're fighting each other over what? Why?
Just because one's on the side of the Riddler and one's on the side of the Joker.
Yeah, no. That's not a motive. No.
But
no,
that's
bad
reason.
Storytelling. That's such bad storytelling. That is not character motivation. That doesn't fit anything within these characters. And you're breaking these 2 side characters to have an entire issue in which the greatest atrocity that's actually depicted on page of this entire war happens. Most of this war does not happen on page. Most of these character interactions never actually happen. The most character interaction we get between these two villains, outside of the ending, is in one issue where they all sit down to go have a dinner with Bruce Wayne. Because the idea is that money will be a greater power than Batman will be in this supposed gang war.
Right. Yeah, the whole sit-down thing with Bruce Wayne was ridiculous, too.
Well, not only is it ridiculous, it's a storytelling trick you see in beginner's workshops. It's like taking a writing exercise and actually working it into your story, where you get your characters and you basically sit them down in a room to talk out their conflict, is the idea. If you're actually doing that in the middle of a superhero story, you're taking the writing exercise, coming up with the flimsiest excuse, and literally just doing the writing exercise. You're not telling the story. Nothing about the story advanced in that issue when you have these two ideologies that should be coming to the table. The problem is that neither character is representing either of their general ideologies, so they have nothing of substance to say.
Well, I wish I had that scene in front of me, because I thought it was kind of it made no logical sense, but I thought it was kind of a tour de force of kind of setting and playing with the expectations of, I don't know, it came off as kind of this shocking, bizarre scene. All of this whole joke of War and Riddles was like taking superhero tropes and doing it as some kind of absurdist play almost. So that the logic behind things didn't matter. It was all about the crazy, what next crazy scene can we come up with? But yeah, I think that Tom King, another one of my basic theses of Tom King is he doesn't really believe in superheroes, and it shows in his stories. He doesn't believe in supervillains either. These aren't real enough to him as a writer for him to take them seriously. He takes them as, I don't know, stunts or magic tricks rather than stories. He may not even be a writer of stories so much as a performer or something.
Okay, so I see what you're saying with the superhero bit. Like, I think that could make a really interesting Batman story if you really pare down, take away the superhero thing, let this go. But that requires a more character-based writing approach. Not that everything has to be a, momentous occasion or anything, but like, you have the Joker sitting at the table, why does this need to happen? And we have an entire page with about 2 sentences worth of dialogue. And that culminates in, who cares about the Riddler? Which he's saying straight. He's not saying as a joke.
Right. Now I'm remembering the insane premise behind that dinner was that whoever wins, whatever, was it Bruce Wayne was going to decide whose argument was better, would get Batman to be on his side. Batman is going to choose one gang of criminals to work with to defeat another gang of criminals.
Yeah.
That really struck me as a bizarre thing for Batman to do.
Oh, right. And then,
but its very bizarreness, I think, is at the core of Tom King. He wants to upend any of your desires for what a superhero should be like.
Well,
yeah. So I'm agreeing with you, but saying that viewed from a certain angle, I was able to enjoy it. But
I don't know.
So
a lot of people.
Tom King's houses of cards all fall apart for me by the end when you then examining what it was really about.
Well, yeah,
but you're right. You're noticing along the way how the characterization's wrong, the motivation's wrong, the logistics are wrong.
Well, and so like a lot of people when they talk about the story point to the bit with Kite Man.
Yeah, which really doesn't make much sense to me.
There's something that works with Kite Man, and I can't really fight against it. Because there's no legacy to fight against there, right? I don't really care. And it's not that I want to fight and say that because something was one way, it can't be another later. It's just if you have an established character, if you want them to go somewhere else, you just have to earn it in some way. And this this story doesn't earn what it does with most of the characters. It spends so much time with Kite Man, though, relatively, that I guess it works. But for me, like, oh, he's a man who has a family and wants things to go okay is like, okay, sure.
And things
whatever.
Always go wrong for him, and he's always used by other people. He's used by Batman. He's used by the Joker. He's used by the Riddler.
He's kind of used by Batman. Though Batman doesn't need... Batman... Okay, here's the part that drives me nuts about Kite Man at the end, though, is Kite Man's brought in to bring in Batman's little squad to have kites to fly into this kind of hard-to-access area. If only Batman had some sort of thing that he used in every incarnation of Batman ever to do exactly, like, he doesn't need a kite. He's Batman. It's ridiculous.
It's almost like he said, I'm gonna make you feel, like with a little kid, I'm gonna make you feel included in the group by giving you something to do. And so he gave Kite Man this thing to do. He could have solved the problem in some other way, but he decided to let Kite Man help him solve the problem. Why? I don't know, because earlier he was happy to keep smashing Kite Man in the face till he would lie down. Can't he just tie Kite Man up? Rather than continuing to beat him up until he will stay down. I don't know. I have to agree with you in every way that this story is an utter mess. All I can say is that I still was enjoying reading it while it was happening. And it was only after the fact that I said, whoa, wait a minute. What's wrong here? Or everything's wrong here.
So, the ending
Yes.
of the war of jokes and riddles,
Yes.
which is played up the entire time, jokes and riddles. We have the Joker and we have the Riddler.
Right.
So much of this hinges on a stupid, like, literary BS question. What is the difference between a joke and a riddle? There should be some profound idea that should split the ideologies between these two and get to it. What do we get at the end of this fucking mess? He asked me if I knew the difference between a joke and a riddle. I said no. He said when I figured that out, I'd understand. Fuck you. Write your story. Don't ask me to write it for you. That is mind-bogglingly... That is terrible. That is wrong. He should have been kicked out of the DC offices from the top window when they turned that in. That is unexcusable. That is bullshit. I can't...
But for a lot of people, it seems to be enough to imply some deep literary thing going on without delivering upon it. It seems to work. It seems to work for people. That's kind of a mystery for me, but...
Most people should demand more from their storytellers, i.e. ask them to actually tell their story.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
But this, to me, reflects that same thing with the Swamp Thing story. What was really the point of this fact that the Swamp King thing killed the bad guy and Batman was upset about him for killing the bad guy? There was no... I wish I had that issue in front of me, but I know he's shouting at the Swamp Thing at the end and for several panels, like, why did you do that? Why did you do that? Or you betrayed me, or you betrayed me. I can't remember now, so that's lame, but...
Well, and so this gets to a bigger problem that I have with how Tom King's writing, what this means on a larger scale. And if I can compare it, just because I've been reading a lot of this guy's stuff lately, J.M. DeMatteis, when he writes these more psychoanalytical stories, which is one of his bread and butter kind of go-to things, is he wants to, when he's exploring a character, ask the big why, is how he puts it. What's the big why behind this character? Mm-hmm. I feel like we get the big why for Kite Man. I feel like Tom King's trying to explore the big why with Batman, though that gets to another issue later.
Well, so the Joker finally laughs when Batman tries to kill the Riddler and the Joker sticks his hand out and the knife goes into his hand instead of into the Riddler's face, which isn't really a good way to kill someone, I don't think, stabbing them in the face. But that's just par for the course with Tom King, with none of the details really making sense. But the Joker shows no sign of pain whatsoever, but laughs hilariously that he's the one who stopped Batman from killing. Because Batman was so enraged, which why wouldn't he be after thousands of people have been killed along the way of this war that was all just appease the Riddler's desire to make the Joker laugh.
Which is, that's supposed to be the reveal at the end, is the Riddler did all this to make the Joker laugh again.
Right. But
why?
Well, so some people would say, wow, that's so cool because these guys are totally insane that he would, destroy a whole city just to make this guy laugh. Not because he loves him or anything, but just because it appeals to his twisted idea of what's important. And it's important that someone named the Joker laugh. Here's the thing. Batman thinks Catwoman might not want to marry him because one time he lost his cool and tried to kill the evil person who killed hundreds of people for no point. And I'm like, that totally makes Batman human at last. That was the only thing in all of this that is relatable that Batman did. Who wouldn't, in the heat of the moment, want to kill someone like the Riddler after all of this murder has taken place?
And the Joker.
Both of them, yeah. Of the two, I'd rather kill the Joker. But both of them, who wouldn't? And so for him to even think that Catwoman, a criminal, is going to be shocked that he wanted to kill the Riddler and maybe not want to marry him, I didn't understand that.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong.
So there was the point behind the Riddler starting the war, and then there's the point behind Batman telling the story to Catwoman.
I'm kind of confused on where continuity is at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Catwoman's killed, right?
I thought so, because she's done some killing in the New 52.
Yeah.
And this is contiguous off of that.
Yeah. So, it doesn't make any damn sense. I don't know.
Well, Catwoman under Tom King, and maybe throughout much of DC, Catwoman never really makes sense. And that kind of bugs me. I could jump way ahead, but to the wedding dress episode to talk about.
Oh.
But well, really, I wonder, we haven't established where Catwoman is in the moral universe at this point that Batman could even make a relationship with her work.
Well, and to the credit of us coming down on this, like, Catwoman doesn't care. So
Right, but it's supposed to be this grand romantic thing that she'll marry him anyway, despite this flaw he had, which for almost anybody would be totally humanizing him and making him easier to get married than someone.
Well, yeah, and
someone
honestly,
who would react to that kind of killer.
I don't think you have to make much of a moral argument to say that wouldn't be a flaw. Like, that's legitimate at that point.
I mean, people often ask, is Batman immoral for not killing the Joker after I know in this case it was the Riddler, but not killing someone like the Joker who's a mass serial killer and who always escapes in the end. If Batman killed him, he would save so many more lives.
Well, which I think is a stupid question. Batman brings him in alive. Great. Here's the question. Why don't the courts put him to death?
Well, yeah, there's that too. Gotham must be in a state without the death penalty.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if a Joker happened, your state would, move that one to Texas or something. Like, that's not...
Well, and the prison guards would leave the Joker alone in a room with some very easy to... very tough guys. But one excuse is the Joker is insane, so he always gets put in Arkham Asylum.
Right.
And the whole Arkham Asylum thing, if you really examine it, doesn't make sense because it basically says it's a mistake to take insane people and put them in an asylum. They would have been better off killed. That's the moral lesson that comes out of Batman comics, even though it's all trying to be liberal and we don't. Justice is never served in the Batman world. And Arkham Asylum is usually an evil place run by evil people, too. But I'm going way deep in the weeds again. But.
Yeah, well, okay. Batman comics aren't reality. I think we'll all agree. So, did you have any other points on the war of jokes and riddles? Because I could nitpick that thing to death, but I feel like I hit the major...
I just apologize to you and the audience for not, having it in front of me, because there's plenty of parts of it that delighted me on a visual level and on kind of a, almost like technical storytelling level, but not on a core real storytelling level. And I just had flipped a switch when I came back to Batman where I could enjoy it that way.
When you say technical versus, what was the other one?
Storytelling tricks, I suppose, or I would say storytelling techniques versus the core storytelling reality.
Okay, I'm not sure I understand the difference there.
Well, like think of it in a movie like The Matrix. There's all these cool scenes that just blow your mind, and you could just enjoy it for the cool scenes and not be interested in what the story is underneath it all. And I feel like with these Tom King books in Batman, he's really, around the time of the War of Jokes and Riddles, really hit his stride in just structuring cool scenes. If you don't question the underlying story anchors.
Well, part of what makes the scenes cool in The Matrix in particular is yes, the framing and all that, but also the framing and realizing that every character has a certain psychological or sociological viewpoint that they represent. And so they're kind of walking metaphors, and in that their juxtaposition and conflict and way that they speak to each other adds layers.
Well, it was the first movie I could think of that has these amazing cool scenes that you can enjoy kind of by themselves if you wanted to. It may not be the best example because The Matrix does have a really cool premise behind it all. Maybe a better example would be something more obscure like John Woo's Hard Boiled or something like that. That has one amazing set scene after another. But it's really just a film about stopping people from, kidnapping people from a hospital or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty basic plot but it's an action Hong Kong film.
Right.
And Hard Boiled is the one with the longest uncut action scene, right?
Right. It's full of all kinds of just amazing action movie things that everyone copied thereafter. But it's been a long time since I've seen that. But I was just trying to evoke that feeling when you're watching like a really artfully made action movie and you're just appreciating the action scenes.
Oh, don't get me wrong. Like, there's some cool storytelling and art here.
Right. It's like a series of set pieces. That's another term people use for when you kind of create something that within the scene is just amazing, but it's not necessarily the connective tissue. Tom King is lacking the connective tissue. I don't know. So, what's amazing then is that you kept reading Batman after hating the War of Jokes and Riddles so much.
I had reasons to push through the War of Jokes and Riddles because I was supposed to talk about it with someone, so I pushed through. And that's something I guess I should bring up is I have a friend that's very much more into Batman, more the way I am into Spider-Man, and he and I were going through some Tom King Batman, and he hates Tom King Batman more than I do.
Oh, really?
He just,
because he loves Batman more than you do, I bet.
Yeah, and he just, the characterization, everything gets to him more than it does me. So.
Yeah, and then the next sequence was Batman and Catwoman having a 3-issue desert adventure where they visit Talia al Ghul in some city or country that the Justice League itself has said is hands off. No one's supposed to go in there. Which is never explained and doesn't make any sense. If they know bad things are happening in there, why would they stay hands off? It's kind of like a vague metaphor for international politics where we have certain countries we know are bad, but we don't do anything about them, like North Korea or something like that. Not that this was at all like North Korea. It was some place controlled by Talia al Ghul, I guess.
Oh, and the whole point is to get to Talia al Ghul.
Right, and have a very long sword fight with Talia al Ghul because Batman is too badly wounded by her henchmen. And Catwoman defeats Talia al Ghul in a sword fight and then gets her to agree to something, but I don't know what. It has something to do with the woman who killed thousands of people.
Well, and this is also kind of more about the fact they're getting married, and Talia al Ghul and Batman have had this
relationship
tryst.
Yeah.
So it's really more about that than the flimsy plot that's... And here's the thing. the weird country bit with just, whatever.
Yeah.
They're not supposed to be there. I'll let that go. Dumb comic book rules, whatever.
Okay.
Because they glaze past it, as they should.
Well, then, dumb comic book rules. Somehow, Selena Kyle, who's never trained with swords, defeats Talia al Ghul, who's one of the greatest assassins of all time, with a sword in a sword fight. Even though Batman couldn't handle everything, she could.
Right. Because she's Catwoman, and she's...
Right. We're getting to the point where Catwoman is just so amazingly wonderful she can do anything. And
yeah, well, she's getting that Batman touch, so it's just rubbing off on her.
She's becoming, in essence, overpowered, even though she's, only human.
Much like Batman.
Right.
So, I don't know. I mean, the other aspect to this story is a lot about the Bat family finding out that they're going to be getting married and them not having it, and essentially having to be okay with it, which isn't much of a story there, really.
So it wasn't really a story, it was just a few beats. And I just was looking at it. I can't figure out what she got from her friend. She just told her friend, I need your help so that I can marry Batman. But what the friend is the friend now going to confess to the murders?
I guess.
The friend says, I killed 237 people. You'll tell them it was you to protect me, even when I ran here, and she protects me. And now after all we've been through, Selena, since we were kids, you're going to make me confess so you can be with him, so you can be happy with him. No, Holly, never. I'm not going to make you. Talia. Oh, wait, no, I'm skipping that. But I want this so much, I have to. All we've been through since we were kids, Holly, I'm asking you, please will you help me? And I believe that's it. We don't hear whether she's going to help her or not. It's left there. That's it.
Yeah.
So I guess we're to presume her friend confesses to the murder. Does her friend then go back to the United States and get... I guess the idea is her friend shouldn't, because she's her friend, even though she's a killer of 237 people, she shouldn't face justice, so she will stay with Talia. Why Talia is protecting her, who knows? And but that will be enough to get Catwoman off. I mean, it just it's very weak. It's weak sauce. It just exists so there can be this big sword fight with Talia, in my opinion.
Basically, and that's really the crux of it. And then we get more justification of Batman marrying Catwoman in Double Date.
Yes.
Which
so I found that the desert Talia scene to be a stunt that didn't quite work for me as well as some of the other stunts. But then the next sequence of 2 issues, I think, which he calls Super Friends, being really cute, where they have a double date with Superman and Lois Lane, because they all know who each of the other is, of course. It was very cutesy, but it was, to me, a stunt that kind of worked. What did you think of these 2 issues?
They're fun issues. I mean, they're kind of forgettable when you put them away, but yeah, they're fine. More or less same with the next 2, which is dealing with Wonder Woman.
No, I had a lot of troubles with the Wonder Woman one, actually.
Again, it's 2 issues that should be 1. The big thing is to have this cliffhanger in which it looks like Batman and Wonder Woman are going to do it.
Right.
And then they don't. Yay.
But here's... Tom... Now, this one upset me. I mean, there were cool aspects to it, and the art was really cool. But Tom King wants us to take Batman and Catwoman and all these characters as sexual beings, seriously. Batman and Wonder Woman are in this other dimension where time passes differently and you don't age. And they fight against the hordes of whatever, Satan, for decades, their time.
Yeah.
And they didn't know that they were going to be there for decades while they gave this other person a break from this endless fight. They did not know about the time thing until they discovered it by having to keep fighting and fighting. I'm trying to find the thing where it shows the timeline. But, because we get fight scenes that say year 19, year 24. So you're in this other dimension away from the person you're engaged to for 24 years.
Right.
And you don't know if you're ever going to get back. And you get a chance to make love to this woman who you've been fighting with for 24 years. And you don't do it? And these are adults who, after 24 years, how clearly do you remember a girlfriend you broke up with 24 years ago? Well, you're not that old to even know, but...
I mean,
24 years ago, you were 6.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it's just, it's silly.
Batman should have, if he wants to dangle this out in front of us, make a real problem. Batman should make love to Wonder Woman and then come back and have to heal his relationship with Catwoman. But the fans were like, oh my God, I can't believe they're going to do this. And then they were so relieved. But it's like setting up this thing that has to happen, and then, oh no, Batman's so good he won't do it. But
and
then...
I like how it's on Batman, but it seems more like, why would Wonder Woman even care? Like, to her, it's much less of a thing. I don't know, it's silly. Also, I don't know, this idea of monogamy being such a virtue where it's like, right. Oh, you were together for 30 years and you did it once, and I think we can move on. Now that, especially considering the circumstances, like, I don't think it would be that big of a deal.
Matt, you thought you were lost forever and would never see me again, and 30 years afterwards you had sex with another woman once. How dare you, I divorce you.
Yeah, because, you know, Catwoman certainly has never done anything duplicitous or damaging. Whatever. And
so that now makes their love unreally pure. Even if 30 years, I'm making up 30 years, 24 years after not knowing if I'll ever see you again, I will still be true to you. It's just absurdly romantic. The wild swings that Tom King takes when I think about it. So I enjoyed reading those issues, but it pissed me off at the same time.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Well, the issue that pissed me off more was actually between the Superman and the Wonder Woman ones, which was this origin of Bruce Wayne, where you have this psycho kid. Basically, this issue culminates with what else is Bruce Wayne but a sick kid with dead parents? And I'm like, you're building up to this whole marriage thing, which... If you understand Batman, the idea of him being that romantically involved with someone is him actually finally moving on from that in a certain aspect as much as he can, because he's always distanced himself from other people because he's so devoted to his crime fight on crime and doing everything like this so that the Bruce Wayne aspect of him can. But reconciling that with Catwoman makes sense, but it also allows him to be more of an adult at the same time and have a long-lasting relationship. I know he's had some love interests in the past, but this supposedly is supposed to be a big step forward. But
it also seemed to tell us not only does Batman inspire criminals, Bruce Wayne inspires people to become psychos, or inspires psychos to emulate him.
Well, yeah.
But on the other hand, it made a cool one-shot horror story with a twist that, you know, wouldn't work over if you tried to have this twist hold up a 6-issue story. But a one-shot story, it's like, oh yeah, whoa, I didn't see that coming.
I mean, yeah, I didn't see it coming. It didn't do anything for me again. But
it was
then.
Good.
Yeah. Then there was this Poison Ivy arc, which drove me bonkers.
It drove me bonkers too. But it was also really cool. So I'm like, I agree with you and disagree with you on every one of these stories. I don't really disagree with you.
Schizophrenic as that kid.
Well, first of all, this story, Mikel Jannin's artwork on all the arcs he's worked on, which is maybe half of them in Tom King's run, have been incredible. And this was like a new peak for Mikel Janin and his colorist.
It's annoying to me that these terrible scripts are getting this gorgeous art to accompany them. I feel like part of the reason people are loving these comics so much is because they're getting top-notch, potentially the best art of any given major superhero comic in a month. And I feel like if you took that aspect and you put on an average art team, maybe punch a little below their weight,
I think that's one of the arts now of being a successful comic book writer is finding a way to get lucky. The clout to choose the artists and then choose the artists well. I think that's part of Scott Snyder's success, that he got top artists. And when I heard him talk about when he first did Batman in Detective Comics, back when it was Dick Grayson as Batman, how he talked them into letting him use Jock. I think it was Jock on that story. And because at the time some more standard Batman artist was slated to do it. Anyway, this is just another aside by me, but if you look at the successful writers, most of them in the way comics currently run, they find a way to call the shots on who the artists are. So King had already worked with Janin, so he got Janin on this series. The same with he brought Joelle Jones onto here too, according to what he said in a podcast. And she's an amazing artist who wasn't getting as much attention as she should until she got onto Batman. Okay,
so the crux of everything I don't like about this Poison Ivy story is right at the top.
Uh-huh.
So for whatever earthly frickin' reason, Bruce Wayne wakes up in a sweat and goes to inoculate himself, and in doing so punches out Alfred and then punches out Catwoman so that they can be free of Poison Ivy's mind control. In doing so, Catwoman is under her control for a moment, and then it is only pages later that it's shown that Catwoman and Batman are the only ones that are safe because of this inoculation.
Right. Why not Alfred, too?
Why not Alfred? Right. Or, conversely, why is Catwoman safe? Because it's said the potion they have can't reverse the effect.
Oh. Huh.
So they break the rules within the same issue.
Yeah. And he apparently already had the potion created.
Good to go.
Just he knew someday Poison Ivy would do this and had concocted.
They talk about some of the components in there and how she was so delighted by his use of whatever chemicals. Yeah. And so we're not even halfway through the issue and already the rules are broken. The setup is so beyond the scale of what this should be. Like, Batman...
I can give them the cheat on Catwoman, to tell you the truth. It's the beyond the scale stuff that happens next that I just can't swallow at all.
Everything at once. Like, Batman goes to punch out Alfred. I don't know why. Like, Poison Ivy's speaking through him. Mm-hmm. But he goes to punch him and then a Flash shows up to take the hit. Like, what?
So the thing is, we have here a Poison Ivy who can poison everyone on Earth at the same time and mind control one individual human. She's still a human being, right? One individual human being can mind control how many people live on the Earth now? 7 billion people on Earth, all at the same time. It's slightly stressful for her. So she is more powerful than the Swamp Thing. She is more powerful than she's basically God.
Yeah, no, she's more powerful than gods in the DC universe at this point.
Right. She's as powerful as God, God in the Judeo-Christian sense.
Arguably more so? Like,
well, God gives people free will, whereas she doesn't. But
this is insane. And then Superman straight up punches Batman. Like, everything in here is so...
Yeah. If you try to think about this logically at all, you are going to reject this story.
Right.
And, people were all upset how Catwoman could defeat the Justice League, which also was a big problem. But this was another story that gave Tom King and his artist a chance to do these enormous set pieces of this crazy world where everyone but two people are mind controlled. And so it allowed him, if you could accept the illogic of everything, to create this crazy situation.
Right. Well, and ultimately, at the end of the day, it's 3 people because Harley's safe because they're...
And she even has a scene where Superman kills Batman.
Yeah.
And then they bring him back to life. Who brought him back to life? I forgot who they said
Harley.
did it. One of the superheroes. Who? Sorry?
I said Harley because she's there when he wakes up. That's not really...
Right. Harley is helping him recover for some reason. I forgot who they said brought him back to life. Who could do that? I mean, that's also...
Does it matter? Like,
it doesn't really matter, no. I just wish I could remember. So
but again...
It's a chance to tell this utterly nuts story, and if you don't care about how the superheroes and the Justice League and the kind of powers that a certain level of supervillain is supposed to have, if you don't care about any of those things, it's a fun, crazy story. If you don't care. That's my...
But again, like...
Go to enjoy this.
So I have to let go of every character motivation. I have to let go of the plot contrivances. I have to let go of the rules that they themselves established.
Well, the character motivation for Poison Ivy is kind of interesting. She feels she killed someone under the sway, was it of the Riddler, I think, that she had joined his team in the War and Jokes of Riddles, tying back. See, I can do continuity too, Tom Kim. I'm Tom Kim, and I can do continuity. It ties back to the War and Jokes of Riddles. But this idea that because you can't deal with your sense of guilt, you commit an even bigger crime, I thought was a very interesting character motivation. But then they talk her out of it by bringing Harley Quinn, her best friend, back. Which the whole idea that Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy are really best friends, in the touchy-feely, emotional kind of way.
Well, they're not selling it as best friends. They're selling it as their lovers.
Oh, okay, you're right, they are. But yet, so I thought he set up this interesting thing, but it was ridiculous. But then it was I couldn't buy them just sort of talking her down.
I don't know.
But so for you, it was utterly horrible, right? Even the little redemption that I found in it, you didn't.
Yeah, no, I didn't find that. I also have seen people who are soft on this story talking about it, because there's a contingent of people who want Poison Ivy to be a hero, which, by the way, is something that had come around and gone around with Catwoman and Poison Ivy and other characters in Birds of Prey, which was running concurrently at the time. And so this story is really out of whack, which really raises bigger continuity questions.
Right. And what do you do with Poison Ivy after this? If you do care about continuity, we've now established Poison Ivy can control every human mind in the world if she ever wants to.
Or more importantly, at this point, pretty much anyone.
Right. So anytime she faces an enemy, she can use this on them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she has more control of the plant world than Swamp Thing, apparently.
Right.
It might have been clever to bring Swamp Thing back for this arc if you had to do it. If you had to do this arc at all. So what I see in... Now the next issue, which you haven't read, has been touted by some people on YouTube as the worst Batman comic ever written. So you should enjoy watching it. I'll tell you about that video. Well, there's a video by Howler Mouse, let's just say. Anyone who wants to can go look up Howler Mouse on YouTube. To Howler Mouse, this was the worst issue ever written. And other people are pretty pissed by the way he portrays Booster Gold in this issue that you haven't read yet. And I'll just say that I was surprised everyone was so upset over the way he portrayed Booster Gold, because he's portrayed everyone else, like we were just talking about Poison Ivy, totally out of character and totally wacko. So what I think, since the War of Jokes and Riddles, he's just playing a series of riffs on this superhero world that he doesn't really believe in, that he just thinks are funny toys to play with. And it doesn't matter, like if you were a little kid and you picked up a Superman doll and you pretend he's Batman, or pick up Captain America and pretend he's Jesus. I don't know. So he's just been between Catwoman saying yes to getting married and to their marriage that may or may not happen in issue 50, because he's saying, I won't tell whether they really do get married or not. He's just playing a series of riffs, and he doesn't care if they totally make sense. He doesn't care if they really wrap up plot-wise. He's just, okay, here I'm riffing this out. I'm doing my crazy Booster Gold story. I'm doing my totally insane Poison Ivy story. I'm doing my crazy Wonder Woman and Batman almost hook up story. And he's just throwing out these riffs. And it's kind of, if these were more expensive comics, I probably wouldn't be buying them. But at the price they come out at $2.99, I just every 2 weeks I'm curious to see what will Tom King do next.
Well, okay.
And for you, it'd be what next atrocity will Tom King commit on the DC universe? And it is kind of what he's doing.
Well, and so I want to make something clear, too, because based on what we've been saying, I think it'd be easy for someone to say, like, okay, well, the big problem is continuity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not continuity in the way we normally talk about continuity that's the problem. It's continuity within the story he's telling. It's bad storytelling that's my problem. I don't necessarily care that Joker is out of whack as long as you earn it, but he didn't earn it. And so,
and there's such a consistent pattern of always having characters out of whack from what we're used to. Normally when we see things, we see these characters slide away from what we used to know them to be gradually. And here we get all these sort of sudden breaks from what we expect people to be like.
And there also doesn't seem to be thoughts of implications of things that are set up. And so it's just very much, I want this to be cool in the moment, kind of like what you're saying, this cool setup. But there's no thought about before or after, at which point there's no setup, there's no consequence, there's no lived-in world, there's no experience to be drawn through panel to panel, page to page, issue to issue at large. And sometimes the issue to issue at large is something we rely too much on in comics, and I get that. But this is such a oversight again and again and again on just how you tell a story that it just doesn't work.
You could almost imagine Tom King in some sort of alternate reality where underground comics still exist, doing underground comics that are goofing on DC Comics.
Yeah.
And it's wild to sort of see this most central of all comics to the DC universe being done this way. I find it kind of fascinating. And a large percentage of fans, unlike you particularly and me to an extent, don't seem to be bothered by this and don't seem to even notice that these are problems. But some people also hate Tom King. And I mentioned the person who made the video saying it was the worst Batman story ever written. But
well, and so again, to press my point a little further, like if these were Elseworlds tales,
right,
they still wouldn't work for the exact same problems.
I agree with you. That's why I thought more of an underground comics approach rather than Elseworlds.
Which is fascinating also because this is the guy who brought us the Injustice comics that effectively is one of those.
No, that's a different King.
No, okay, it's a different King. Never mind.
Sorry.
Well then, I can't even give him that much.
What's his name? Tom something, but not King? Or is it something King?
I'm going to make a clicky-clack with the keyboard.
Tom Taylor. Tom Taylor is a very good writer of consistent, reliable superhero stories. He did a great job on Earth 2 and a great job on the Injustice stories. Now he mostly writes for Marvel. I was always shocked that DC didn't promote Tom Taylor to some bigger comics, bigger mainstream within their universe comics. Because
he's doing X-Men Red, which has been ballsy.
I haven't, been reading. As you know, I don't read any X-Men, but yeah, Tom Taylor's this great writer, but much more. He plays within the sandbox very well. Whereas
yes,
Tom King wants to rebuild the sandbox every 3 issues,
and then shitting again.
So, I guess I think his shit smells okay. But I think his shit comes in a nice candy coating.
Oh, all right.
Now my daughter can't listen to this episode.
I think we hit that before.
But you know what? As a kind of Elseworlds story, the Batman Annual number 2, I don't even remember Annual number 1, but with art by Lee Weeks, it was called Date Night's Last Rites. And it's sort of a 1-issue run-through of the entire relationship of Batman and Catwoman. And I loved it. But it definitely felt like an Elseworlds. It didn't feel like it existed in the DC continuity. if it were totally in the DC continuity, then we know for sure Batman and Catwoman are not only going to get married, but live, stay together until one of them dies in old age. But it was a beautiful sort of relationship comic book that was just the right length. And so I think at times Tom King can pull these beautiful things out of his hat, and other times just pull craziness out of his hat.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think in the long run, from everything we've seen him so far, that his most successful book is The Vision. I don't know if you've read that or not.
I thought it was Mr. Miracle, but both are his bigger successes.
Well, Mr. Miracle isn't over yet, so it may overtake The Vision, but
fair enough.
My personal take on the Mr. Miracle is that is another one of these riff kind of things. Each issue is a riff on something different, and it's not got an overall emotional story the way the Vision, all 12 issues form one story about an emotional arc that a group of people go through. But anyway, we could do another podcast about Mr. Miracle when that's done, maybe.
Yeah, totally.
So, any last words on the Batman stuff? I think we pretty much ripped him every kind of hole we possibly could.
Here would be my plea to those who might be meditating on this. Read better comics.
So, off the top of your head, what's the best comic out there right now to read?
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Okay. So, go out. Read that. Do not read Batman.
How about you? What's your favorite on the stands? Generally,
I'd say generally Kill or Be Killed.
Wow. All right.
Which is even more explicitly in the second to last issue that just came out this week, an homage to Spider-Man. So you're going to have to read it when it's done.
Oh, man.
They're going to end at issue 20. And I think I saw an image of the issue 20 cover, which is an homage to a Spider-Man cover, even though none of the other covers have any reference to Spider-Man.
Okay, I'm sucked in now.
There's a character in issue 18, or was it 19, whatever the most recent issue was, that has a name that is one letter away from a major character's name in Spider-Man, a major friend of Peter Parker's.
Mary Wan.
But I'll tell you after that. I don't want to ruin it for other people. Or maybe I shouldn't ruin it for you even after the podcast is over. But but anyway, I had already suspected for quite a while that it was all a goof on Spider-Man. Or goof is the wrong word, but Spider-Man's a big influence on it. And would you like to mention the other podcast you're on?
Oh, okay. Well, for those not in the know, I am one half of the Untold Talks of Spider-Man, where we go through lesser discussed Spider-Man books and rake them.
Well, you've liked some and raked some others, right? So far, you've done 3 different ones.
That are out, yes.
Yes.
And
that I've heard.
By the time this podcast comes out, there should be hopefully
Another
one or
one.
2 more.
And I find it very enjoyable to listen to, even though I probably won't seek out any of the ones you've discussed so far. Maybe the last one, the Kurt Busiek one, if I have time, I might read that one.
I was going to say, if that does turn out to be a Marvel Unlimited or something, or if you could find a quarter bit or
it
something,
probably is a Marvel Unlimited
at the time.
I think.
Yeah. But that's part of a whole Spider-Man network. But if we're going to be talking about podcasts to recommend, I would feel remiss to not mention Longbox Reviews.
Yes, I was going to save him for another time, but yeah.
Well, I'm not.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we both love Longbox Review. Eric, he's kind of almost a mentor to us. Without him, we might not be doing this podcast.
We were on YouTube, and he kind of brought in this idea of the transition to podcasts, and he got me more interested in comic book podcasting overall. And he's doing some great work with Peter Rios on their, what's it called, the Legion Project. They're going through a series of Legion
the
books
Baxter
right now.
Building Legion series they're doing. And he has a lot of, we've been guests a year or 2 ago, I guess 2 years ago now, on there. We talked with him at a bar at a con, and he put us in his pod. And he has Oddfellow Thoughts on, Travis, and George from the George and Tony Show, and I think he's had some other guests too. But whether he has guests on or he's doing his solo thing, that's definitely a podcast that we both recommend highly.
Right.
So thank you, Eric.
All right.
Okay, well, we will be back soon because we never stay dead. Bye-bye.
Bye.